Hello and welcome to the Fairhaven Church Parent Talks podcast, where we desire to equip and empower you as parents to lead well in your home. Today's going to be a great day. I believe it. I cannot believe that we are only 5 days away from these two crazy kids getting married.
It's true.
So welcome, Johnny and Lydia.
Thank you.
So are you ready? I mean, 5 days is not very long.
Yeah.
You are ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Johnny?
Lydia's ready, which means I'm ready.
That is the right answer. So for my for real getting started question, my question for you, which I think is an important one, is if you have the day alone, what would you choose to do?
I don't like having days alone.
I have an immediate answer.
What?
Now, I might be a gamer. So I'll probably be, I'm currently playing through a new game right now. So I'll probably try to finish that up. Maybe take a nice little stroll, do some cooking. I've been going to Zen Grill a lot, which is a new place that opened up on Wilmington. And it's a hibachi place and they have really good food. So I'd probably stop there too. So
By yourself?
yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
I've done
He's
it
only gone by himself.
I've
I
done
will
there-
not go.
I've gone there multiple times already, like twice a week so far. It's really good. And I hope that place never closes down, so I'm going to keep giving them business.
that's amazing. Lydia?
I don't know. I would sleep in, I think. And then maybe watch a show that like only I like.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe doing some laundry and cleaning.
Whoa. I mean, I was
don't know.
thinking like fun things.
I don't
Yeah,
know,
that's
because
not
I like
fun.
to see fun things to do with people.
Yeah, you are a people-y kind of
I am.
person.
I don't like being, having a whole day to myself doesn't sound fun to me.
Huh.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing to me, I'll be honest.
Sounds pretty fun to me.
So I know exactly what I would do. Like when my kids are, because I don't work on Fridays typically, so when my kids are in school, if I could not be working on my master's degree, that would be like helpful. But I
That's a great
love
feeling.
that it would be a great feeling. I still got a little while. But I love going to my favorite coffee shop in the morning,
Which is?
which is lot number 1 in Lebanon.
Oh.
And then I love walking around and checking out the shops and trying not to buy things, which is hard sometimes.
Ooh,
but I
would go
love
shopping. Sorry.
Yeah, you would go. You could go shopping, but I would just spend a day doing things like that.
Shopping's a chore. It's a big chore.
It is a big chore. Okay, so today we're gonna focus on our lesson. We're in the book of Deuteronomy, and so we're kind of taking like a jump forward a little bit. In today's lesson, we're actually going to be focusing on the chapters 31 through 34, and we're hearing essentially Moses' farewell speech to the Israelites. So he's helping them to remember God's goodness. But before we jump in, Johnny, there's, like I said, we kind of like jumped forward a lot. So a lot has happened from the time that the Israelites were checking out the promised land until now when Moses is saying goodbye. So can you kind of help bridge that gap?
Yes, I mean, if you look at the time frame, there's kind of like, so you got Exodus, they escape out of Egypt. That's a whole book in itself. And then you got Numbers. They're traveling the wilderness. And in the wilderness, one generation of the Israelites have disqualified themselves from entering into the promised land. And then at the very end of Numbers, like a little sliver, is Deuteronomy, which Deuteronomy is a book written by Moses, and it literally means second law or the repetition of the law. And Moses here, there's kind of two sections of Deuteronomy. The first section, he's addressing the people, and he's reminding the people of like, hey, like, this is who God is. He made a covenant with you on Mount Sinai, and we are to walk in that. And then the second part is the law, and he kind of outlines a few different things in the book, such as worshiping God, caring for the poor. He gives a framework for the leaders of the Israelites, civil laws like marriage, families, and social justice, protection of the widows, orphans, and so on. So these laws are very important to the Israelites because, this is how they're supposed to set their lives and they're supposed to follow it. But it's incredibly important for us while we're reading these to make sure that we understand the context of it. Because if we look at this with our modern law, we're always going to be like, well, what is this? What is this? But when you look at it in the context and the framework of their lives back then, of the ancient Israelites, they had all these things to set them apart from all their neighbors, like the Syrians or the Babylonians. These were laws to set them apart for God. So here, Moses is trying to stand in front of the new generation that's about to enter into to the promised land. They're right outside of the borders of Canaan, and he's saying, "Hey, here's all these laws. Be faithful to God and follow Him." And so that's where we are today.
Yeah, so that brings us to what is considered, like I said, Moses' farewell. The question that I have for you, Lydia, is what is he trying to communicate to the Israelite people throughout these 4 chapters?
Yeah, so Moses is communicating to the new generation of Israelites, like Johnny was saying, and he's giving them the instructions of the law and reminding them of the covenant they have with God and telling them to pass this on to future generations so that they can be blessed, but also warning them of like what could happen if they are not following this covenant. And then in this time, Moses is also reminding them of their time in the wilderness and how God has been faithful and good and provided for them and encouraging them to look back on that time.
Yeah, so not surprising because we saw this all throughout the book of Exodus too, but Moses is really imploring them to remember what God has done. And so why is it important for us now to be able to look back and remember what God has done for us?
Yeah, so it's important for us to look back on what God has done for us so we can see His faithfulness and goodness and just help us to remember truth and how He's provided for us in the past and He's been good and faithful, and that can help us in like future situations when we're facing a challenge and just be reminded of what God has been there for me in the past and He will be there for me today. And it just helps us to just remember all that He's done, and I think it helps us to build up our relationship with God and walk closely with Him.
Yeah, and I think like it's like this constant need that we have to be reflecting on and remembering. And something that I'm not good at that I wish I did much better at is journaling, like being able to have a written documentation of how I've seen God and His faithfulness. Because sometimes I think like hard things come and we forget all the ways that we've seen God be faithful, even though we know He's faithful, you know? And so if we have those opportunities to like write it down or to like have these markers in our lives that say like, I walked through this time and I saw God's faithfulness to me in like this unique and special way. I think that's something that is cool about having community with each other is that when we're open and honest with each other as we're walking through hard things, as friends, we can help each other remember like, hey, when you were walking through this, we together prayed about this and we saw God's faithfulness through it. But I was just thinking as you were talking, like that importance of being able to go back and reflect on it and remember His faithfulness. And I just am like in awe of Moses in this story because he has seen God's faithfulness. He is led really well with a bunch of people who are really hard to lead. And he's like passing on the torch without getting to experience like the fruit of what he's been leading the people to. Of course, he has a different kind of goodness that he's about to walk into. But I just think it's like really incredible. Like I think of Moses and his faithfulness and like the legacy really that he leaves. And I think that's really cool. But Johnny, as we need to reflect on His goodness or His faithfulness, we have to do that because there are things that cause us to grow distant from God. And so what causes that to happen? And what in our lives causes us to forget that He's faithful?
Yeah, I really enjoy. So in Deuteronomy 30, Moses actually poses a choice for the Israelites. And he actually calls it a choice between life and death. He says, "Now listen, today I'm giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disaster. For I command you this day to love the Lord your God, and to keep His commands, decrees, and regulations by walking in His ways. If you do this, you will live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you are about to enter and occupy. But if your heart turns away and you refuse to listen, and if you are drawn away to serve and worship other gods, then I warn you now that you will be certainly destroyed. You will not live a long, good life in the land you are crossing the Jordan to occupy." And so there's kind of these two different choices that we have. We can grow in our relationship, like he says, love the Lord your God, or keep his commands, or walk in his ways. And we do those things when we're pursuing him and walking in a relationship with him, making time for him. And there's another choice. There's things that will distract us. And like here he says, if you are drawn away to serve and worship other gods. And I think the world is very good about telling you to live a life for yourself, telling you to be like, hey, like, do what you want to do, be you, make your own choices, follow your own path. And God here is saying, like, that is going to lead to your destruction. That is going to lead to your downfall. You will not live a long, good life in the land you are crossing the Jordan to occupy if you do this. And we are called to follow God, to walk in a relationship with him, to grow in it. And James 4:8, I really like what James 4:8 has to say. It says, come close to God in your heart, and God will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. And we can't live our lives where we're pursuing God and pursuing the world. We have to make a decision, say, hey, I want to live a life that God is calling me to. I want to live a life that's for him. Because when we're doing the half in, half out, we're not truly putting our hearts towards God. We're not growing in it. And we fall away from God when we pursue things away from him, when we're distracted, when we don't obey him, when we don't follow him, when we don't spend time in the word or in prayer, we fall away from him. And we have to be fully set on him to continue forward. So
yeah, and that actually leads us into something that I read when I was studying this week that just like I wrote down in my notes, like, dagger. Like, to me, it was like, oh, that's so much conviction. But the statement said, we can make a lot of excuses, but the truth is that we are as close to God as we want to be. I was just like, whoa. So I'm just going to read it again, just so we can hear that phrase. We can make a lot of excuses, but the truth is that we are as close to God as we want to be. And so parents, like, I would just ask you to think through with yourself, are you as close to God as you want to be? I mean, when I was reading through that and just in my own life, like, has been a busy summer. It's been super crazy. And I'm feeling like that distance from God, not because he's gone anywhere, but because busyness has gotten in my way. And so for me, just reading through that, like, I'm like, no, I'm not as close to God as I want to be. So, like, what in my life do I need to evaluate and reflect on in order to make sure that is changed so that I'm leaning into God? Because, again, he's always there. He's a pillar. He's immovable. And so he doesn't ever move, but I have to make some changes. And so, Lydia, just like as parents are thinking through this, like, how can they talk to their kids about that in their relationships? Like, being able to, if we're saying you are as close to God as you want to be, like, what are some things that parents can put in practice with their kids or can talk to them about?
I think just continuing that conversation and just asking and checking in with your kids of like, hey, how are you doing with God? How are you walking with him? And how are you remembering what he's done? And just reflecting on your relationship with him. And even as a family, getting together to do things, reading scripture together, praying as a family, and just thinking, as a family, how close are we with God? And that reflects probably how close with God your kids are.
So true. And I think, like, being that we are at the end of July and now we're walking into a new school year where we have, like, new rhythms and routines, like, we as families have to prioritize our time in church and spending time with God, like, making that a priority as part of our routine, you know. With that school structure or the different structures you have in your own home, like, making sure that church and your time with God is at the top of that priority list is really, really important. You know, this next week, we're going to be walking into a new book of the Bible. And as we were sitting here, honestly, I started rehearsing in my mind, like, wait, which is the next book? So I started, like, going through the Old Testament books in my head. So parents, I think also as we're traveling through the Bible, Genesis through Revelation, help your kids to be able to see how the Bible is structured and be able to go through the books of the Bible together so they know, like, okay, what's coming up next. And I think the best way to do that is not through a tablet or a phone, but through opening God's word and flipping through the Bible and being able to see where all of the books are located. So I was just thinking about that because we're moving into Joshua. And so we'll be in a new book of the Bible next week. But we hope you'll join us because we're going to start talking about the Promised Land, and it's going to be a really great next several weeks. So we hope to see you next week.